All right. Well, Julia, we'll jump into it. It's so good to see you again. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on, Diane.
Absolutely. I can't wait to talk about this new book that you have. This is your first book, Declutter Your Heart and Your Home.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this book. So excited.
Okay, so you've had a presence online for quite some time now, rich in what matters. What made you decide to take the leap and write about what you've been talking about online?
The average home now has over 300,000 items in it, and housing sizes have doubled in the last 50 years. We're just living in a society that has more stuff, more
Yeah.
possessions than any society in the history of the world. But we weren't made to manage that much stuff. We weren't made for distraction and discontent and overwhelm. And so the book tells a story that I haven't always been a minimalist, pretty far from it. Actually, I bought things for years. I racked up $40,000 in consumer debt. So I had all this stuff, but I wasn't happy. And for me personally, this led to a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. And eventually I realized that my stuff was a problem. So I got rid of 75% of it. And I learned that you can live an abundant life without an abundance of stuff. So I wrote the book just for anyone who wants to live a lighter life with less stuff. And the book is full of practical tools and actionable steps to make it possible.
When you first began decluttering, were you familiar with the term minimalism, or was this more about getting decluttered and organized?
I actually had not heard of minimalism until I had a therapy appointment. And it was the same week that I had realized that my stuff was a problem and that there was something I needed to do with my possessions. And
Mm-hmm.
at the end of that therapy session, she said, Julia, have you ever heard of minimalism? And I hadn't. I was like, no. And I was imagining in my mind, you mean houses with white walls, next to nothing in it? She's like, look into it. There's a lot more to it than that. I think you'd be interested. And so, no, I think there are still so many misconceptions about minimalism and what it is. And people think it's somebody who always wears black and only has 100 items, maybe doesn't have kids because they don't want their house to be messed up. And that's not it at all. Minimalism is just a tool. It's a tool to live your life with intention, to let go of the things that don't matter so you can make space for what does. And this applies to your possessions, but it also applies to thought patterns and calendar commitments. And so it's just really discerning what you let into your life, living your life with intention. And for me, that really resonated when I heard it.
Some would say living your life with clear intentions. Haha.
Yes, exactly.
Putting that name of the show.
Hmm.
No, absolutely. I agree with you. And it's funny, I was going to talk to you about the state of our homes being an outward representation of the state of our minds. Like you said, you were feeling that at that point in time. The interview I just got off of before I jumped on here with you, we were debating that because a few months back, I was speaking to someone who didn't necessarily believe that was true. But I'm curious to hear your opinions on that.
Yeah, for me, it definitely was. And I look even more as it that the state of our homes can reflect the state of our souls. And the book is divided into three sections that parallel a journey through an outer home and an inner home. So the first section is laying the foundation and decluttering the soul. Then you journey up to the second section, which is decluttering the main floor and the heart. And an example chapter here would be like decluttering your wardrobe and letting go of comparison. So there's always this outer and inner piece. Then section 3, as you continue up journeying through the home, is decluttering the upstairs and the mind. This would be like letting go of sentimental items and letting go of fear. So what I realized as I was decluttering my outer world is I was actually curating two homes, an outer home and an inner home. And so the first housed my possessions, but the second, the home of my soul, housed God. And I remember just looking back at this time, visualizing my inner home in prayer. And what did it look like? It was very cluttered too. I imagined all these boxes inside this inner structure that Paul says is supposed to be a temple of the Holy Spirit. And I'd invite him in, but he wouldn't really have space to move throughout my soul. He would be crammed in this corner because of all these boxes. And in the book, I talk about inner clutter like hurry and comparison, reactivity, restlessness, distraction. And so this is what I had inside. And what I realized was, as I started to uproot this inner clutter too, that I began to really feel his movements in my life in a way that I hadn't before. And I began having these overwhelming urges to do things. Like, for example, to text a friend who I knew was due with her fifth baby soon, to send her an encouraging text. And I would, and she would respond right away, please pray. I'm headed to the hospital. I'm in labor. I'm like, that's not a coincidence. That's the Holy Spirit. He's starting to move in my life, and I could feel this. And I think that's the way we're designed to be in union with him, to just for him to be our moment to moment companion, to be more in tune with his workings inside us. So I think it is worth looking at our external environment. It can serve as a lens to our inner environment, but not in a shitting way, not in a judgmental way. There's no benefit in that. More of just a curious, kind of observing way. Like, what is my home reflecting back to me? Is it chaos? Is it distraction? Is it peace? Is it calm? And then are those accurate descriptors of my inner home as well?
Yeah. And taking that one step further, too, I always say if what you discover, if what you see is something that is disappointing or that you wish were different, don't allow that to keep you stuck. Because I think oftentimes people that I've spoken with have just gotten into this cycle. It's as with anything, the shame cycle, then they don't make any changes because they're just stuck there. So to me, I'm like, just acknowledge that and allow time to continue to move forward, but making those small changes
Yeah,
throughout.
right. And the
Yeah.
first step is awareness too. So,
Yeah.
yes, awareness that, okay, something is off here. Yes, I need to
Mm.
make a change, but then not getting stuck in shame because that's not from God. That's not for us, and then relying
Yeah.
and trusting on him. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So let's go back to, do you have anything else to say about minimalism and how it shaped your faith as you continued going through that process, what it's looked like in your life?
Yeah, I think that one other aspect of my faith that really helped me get into minimalism, helped me actually let go of my stuff, was that my faith allowed me to detach from
Mm-hmm.
my possessions. And at the time, I was really attached to my stuff when I was starting to declutter it. I'd spent the money on it, I was invested in the time that I'd spent looking for it. So it was mine, it was part of me. But then I realized that I was going to have to detach from it. So I looked at the Bible and I realized that there's no blanket statement in scripture that says every single follower of Jesus has to let go of a bunch of stuff to follow him. We see some people were called to. The rich young man was, then like Simon Peter and Andrew, James and John. But then we also see Lydia in the book of Acts, who, when she
Mm-hmm.
became a believer, she held on to her stuff and she used it to make her home the first European church. And I found this was interesting. So I was realizing that the question was not how do I give everything away, but how do I follow Jesus with everything? So I was going to have to give him access to everything, not just what I would declutter, but also what I was going to keep, because it was always his anyway. And I started looking at my possessions differently after that. I realized that the things of the world, they may be good and beautiful, but the truly good, the truly beautiful, they belong to a higher world. So we can sense goodness and beauty in the worldly things, but none of them last. So I started seeing my possessions more as like fireworks or bubbles or ocean waves, things that were transient, things that in the moment we could observe and enjoy, but then let them go. And so I think my
Mm-hmm.
faith really allowed me to finally realize none of it was mine in the first place and just to see my stuff differently.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to ask you some maybe a challenging question because I don't know how you've answered this on other interviews. So I was going to say, what is your encouragement then for for people to start? I'm not going to let you say, because this is something that I've said here. I want to hear your answer. I've always said start in the bathroom and or the entryway. But do you have an answer outside of those?
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't start in either of those places actually.
Okay, where would you start?
Yeah, so where I would start is in the area of your home that is causing you the most stress. Because what
Mm-hmm.
I found when I got started, I had heard, start in a small, contained, non sentimental area, your kitchen
Mm-hmm.
drawer. And I tried the kitchen drawer, but then I had all the good feels of a finished decluttering project. I had an organized kitchen drawer, but I turned around and my house was just flooded with kid stuff. And I was immediately stressed again. So it wasn't making any functional change in my home. So, what I
Yeah.
did and what I'd recommend doing is just look at all the areas of your home that you want to declutter, write out a list of each area, and then rate them from 10 to 1, 10 being the most stressful, 1 being the least, and then start at the top and just go down that list in order. And that way, you're making functional change in your home. For me, kids' clothes was at the top, and I started decluttering kids' clothes right away. I noticed such a lightening in my home that I didn't feel with that kitchen drawer. My daughter, who was 5 at the time, she started helping with laundry independently because now the amount of stuff matched her ability level. And I'm like, I am on to something. And that really motivated me then to declutter kids' toys next. So that's what I would
Yeah.
recommend doing.
So let's keep talking about kids and what minimalism has looked like. Again, you took control of the clothing and then worked your way down through the toys. What were your children's opinions here, or did they have feedback for you? And then how have you allowed minimalism or the principles of minimalism to weave themselves into your children's lives?
So our kids, when I started, first decluttered, we had 2 girls and one was a baby and the other was about 5. So the 5-year-old, I have this memory of after I had decluttered her room, I was holding my breath. I did not know how she was going to react. I had no idea. But I remember peering into her room and just watching her spin around in all this open space because it had been so cluttered before. Now it's definitely different. She was just spinning. She turned to me and she said, "Mom, thank you. I love this." And she was so happy and you could tell. And I was like, wow, okay. And so I also remember that I walked into that room for the first time. I could sit on the floor with her. I could be with her in that room and be really present to her. Where before I had been so distracted in that room, just looking around, seeing all the stuff that needed done. And it was just way too much. And I could just be present and be there with her in her space. And I just remember how amazing that was. And she liked it too. And at first, I didn't let go of all the toys. I boxed them away for a while. So if she asked for something, she could have it back. And really, she didn't ask for much, maybe 1 or 2 things. And then after 3 months, I just let them go. But I also think, to your second question, that minimalism has been so life giving for our kids. It's teaching them so much about what matters in the world. And they're learning that it's okay not to live the way everybody else does. They're learning that stuff isn't the most important thing in our lives. And really, those are the main takeaways, too. They're learning to be generous. Even just yesterday, the girls are going to a birthday party and we hadn't gotten a gift. I said, okay, shop the house. They're like, okay. So they went and they did, and they found some really great gifts that used to be theirs. And now they're the neighbor girls. So,
Love
yeah, they're
doing
just
it.
learning generosity.
Okay. Let's talk about another benefit of minimalism, and that being the effects on our finances. Did you and your husband, which actually we never talked about your husband, when you had this realization, was your husband on board? I don't remember if we've ever talked about that on the show. I think maybe we have, but reinform us.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we have. He was fine with me doing really what I wanted with my own stuff. I did kind of gravitate toward his golf magazine pile initially. Like it was huge. I would have happily decluttered that. But I realized that I needed to start on my own stuff, and I did. And as he saw the change I was making with all this stuff that I was getting rid of that was mine, he
Mhm.
really did start to get on board. It probably took 5 or 6 months for him to kind of warm up to the idea, but he did. And
Yeah.
yeah, he's on board with it now. Hmm.
And I think going back to the title of your book, Declutter Your Heart, Declutter Your Home, if we're talking about decluttering the heart and the individual's heart motivations for why we're keeping and maintaining the things that we do, even considering my daughter in her room, I don't want to overwhelm her with my ideas. I want this to be her decision ultimately, within the bounds of me providing that, I guess, guidance, because that's my job as a mom. But I do think that until, like you said, until you get your mind and your heart right, none of these things are going to change. Like you really have to start at that ground level and then make your way through the things.
Yeah, you absolutely do. And that's one of the reasons that I think being a decluttering dictator toward kids is not really helpful. You really want to give them ownership in the project because that's how they learn the generosity piece. They're naturally generous. They're going to respond if you just put a box in their room and say, "Hey, there's kids that don't have as much stuff as you. Next week I'm taking some stuff to those kids. Add to the box if you want to." And then you leave the room and you let them, and they will respond if they're consistently given that opportunity to do that because they're naturally generous. And then you are changing their heart in that way.
Yeah. So going back, sorry, I cut off my question. We were talking about finances and just the impact of minimalism on finances.
Yeah, minimalism has had a huge impact on our finances. We had all that debt, all that consumer debt, and now we don't. And it just gives you a real intentional way to view shopping, buying stuff. It's not anti-spending by any means, but just when we know that we don't need to throw more money towards stuff, that we can't buy our happiness, we start to break the cycle that's causing all that consumer debt. And then two, you're not going to be renting a storage unit anymore. That's going to save you money. You're not buying duplicate items you don't need. You don't need 7 pairs of jeans if you have one that works great. You're not maybe going to have a huge home. You can. It doesn't mean you can't. But sometimes you'll have a smaller home and a smaller mortgage, and you can use different things like it within your home, like mason jars, multi-use items. You can use them for vases and food storage and drinking glasses. So you're just not buying all this stuff, and your mindset just towards purchasing and possessions changes, and that impacts your finances.
Absolutely. I had an episode a handful of years ago. Actually, it was probably when I first started the podcast, but we were talking about areas that you are still, I guess, maximalist in. Do you find yourself having any of those areas? For me, it was books, sweaters, and then I can't remember. Oh, at the time it was coffee, just having an abundance of coffees in my home or getting coffee out. But am I resonating with you?
Yeah, you are. I think that maybe plants. I have a lot of plants in our home. I really love the plants. As far as other types of things that I buy, I can't really think of anything like that. But again, like minimalism isn't anti-spending. I think it really does allow you to realize that you can spend a lot on one thing, but then not a lot on the other. So there's trade-offs. You're not going to just you don't need it all, and you're not going to buy it all. Maybe you spend generously on tipping, but you just cut costs ruthlessly on your car. Or maybe, you spend on your kids' education, but you cut costs ruthlessly on your home. And so it's just this idea that there's trade-offs and that you don't need to buy it all. But yeah, I mean, plants, I spend some money on plants from time to
Okay.
time.
Okay, so like you said at the beginning, minimalism is a tool to use on every facet of life. But I want to touch on something that I don't think I've really spoken to. Maybe I've done a couple of episodes on it, but digital clutter, this idea of digital clutter and digital minimalism. Have you taken minimalism and applied that to your digital life?
I love this question. I think this is so important because what I've found that you can get rid of a lot of stuff and you can have all this extra time and all this extra space in your life. But if you are still tethered to your phone and if you are still impulsively grabbing your phone and scrolling all the time, you aren't free. You aren't finding that freedom that minimalism promised if you're not, intentional about how you use your phone. And so I found that when I first kind of started blogging that I was having this issue. I was like, oh, let me check how many blog hits I got. Let me check the Instagram hits. And you first got to be aware of that that's happening, and then find some tools to counter that. I even put a rubber band around my phone at one point so that when I tried to scroll, it would stop and I couldn't. I changed my phone to grayscale. There's a study that shows that they looked at college kids, and college kids were on their phone about 40 minutes less each day if they changed their phone to grayscale. So I started doing that. And then I just implemented some new routines too, keeping mornings quiet. If you look at your phone first thing in the morning, then you're going to focus on what your phone says is important, not what matters most to you. And just making yourself less available. We have no obligation to constantly be on call. And that's a mindset shift, I think, that worked too. And so, yeah, just as I started being more intentional about my possessions, I did around my phone use too.
Also, going back to when you originally were making these changes, what were your extended family members' opinions or thoughts? You said you were radically different prior to this. So were they like, okay, this isn't going to stick? Were they appreciative? Yeah, what did that look like?
Yeah, they probably questioned if it was going to stick or not because they knew that I liked to shop and I liked to spend things on things. But I don't know if they took me seriously actually for the first even year, because I would tell my mom, hey, we're going to try this thing where we live with less stuff. So please don't come over and shower the kids with stuff. Please don't give us all this gifts, give us experiences instead. So I tried that right away. And it really didn't stick for probably 2 years into my minimalism journey, that then she finally did start respecting and realizing, oh, if I give her this, she's just going to donate it. I'm not going to spend my money on these toys anymore, these plastic light up things, these things that I don't want in our home. So I think they did question it at first, but once they knew that I was serious about it, and then they saw the change in me too, I became calmer. I was more patient. I was less reactive. I was more present. And I think when they saw those changes too, they're like, she's onto something that's working for her.
Yeah, absolutely. So realistically, what does it look like now with the way that they give gifts to your kids? How do you navigate that?
Well, at Christmas, I will tell them exactly what they want. I'll have the kids pick out one thing they want, and then I'll pass that on to grandma. She still likes to buy things for them, so they'll buy at least one thing. And then anything beyond that is experiences, really. And my mother-in-law is even on board. This year, she sent us money for a zoo pass, whereas in the past we'd gone to her house in Seattle and had to buy another suitcase to bring all the gifts home back to Kansas City where we live. So
Yeah.
she's really changed how she spends money on our kids as well.
Okay, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we kind of like briefly touched on various areas. Obviously, your book goes into a lot more depth, but was there one final word of encouragement you wanted to leave for the listeners or something that we didn't touch on that was maybe had a really profound impact on your journey into minimalism?
I think it's just important to realize the research around minimalism too. Like, yes, you hear my experience and you can tell that it's really benefited me. But studies are even showing that the amount of stress women feel in their homes can be tied to the amount of possessions that they and their family have collected. Like the study done at UCLA, where they found that the cortisol levels were higher in moms who described their homes as cluttered and chaotic versus those who described their homes as restorative. Those moms with the higher cortisol, it stayed high all day. It led to stress, anxiety, poor sleep. So I think when we realize that we really need to question what is this environment we're creating doing to our health, doing to our mental, our emotional well-being. And society doesn't ask us to stop and question that. Society says, just buy more, you'll be happier. But we need to look and see that we weren't made to manage all this stuff and realize that there is a different, lighter way to live if we feel called to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry if you said this at the beginning and my son interrupting has made me forget, but did you just describe Rich in What Matters? That was your blog that you had. That came after your minimalism journey?
So, Rich in What Matters, I started that blog when I decided to go into minimalism. So, like at the very beginning, that happened
Okay.
when I decided to go. And it actually came from a Bible verse from Luke chapter 12 that said, Be rich, said, Your life does not consist of possessions, be rich in what mattered. And that was the verse that really spurred this whole journey for me. So,
I don't know why it's giving you a thumbs down. Did you see that? Maybe it's because I was like, I don't know. Okay, I couldn't remember where that aligned. I think you did mention that on a previous episode that we
mhm.
recorded. Yeah, okay, okay. Yeah, so you've been tracking this since the start. I mean, people can go back through the archives and really see how you've been impacted for years.
Yeah, for 6 years. I've been on this minimalism journey for 6 years now with our family. We now have 5 kids. They're
Mm-hmm.
11, 7, 4, 2, and 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
never imagined we'd actually have this many kids either. I think minimalism has made more space for what matters. And I have just loved having the babies and being more present to them and being with them. So yeah, it's been quite the journey. And you can go back on my blog and you can look 6 years back at the blog posts.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so that's where we can find you again. Instagram, Rich and What Matters, the same as the blog. Where can we find the book and connect more if we haven't mentioned it yet?
The book is available anywhere books are sold. You can check it out at your favorite place to buy books. And I'm on Instagram also at Rich and What Matters.
Perfect. Well, as we wrap up the conversation here, I'm going to ask you the question that I've been asking all of my guests, and it is, what does it mean to you to live a life with clear intentions?
To me, to live a life with clear intentions would be identifying what truly matters in your life and then letting go of anything that doesn't truly align with that so that you can have space to focus on what matters. And that actually sounds a lot like my definition of minimalism. So yes, I would say that that is what a life with clear intentions is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that my idea of that name and just kind of looking to my own life of what does it mean to live a minimalist life? Yes, it's to me, I'm like, oh, that means my intentions seem to be clear. I have clarity here. So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I think they will go hand in hand for sure. But I appreciate you writing this book, Julia. It is a great resource for people that are just beginning their minimalist pursuits and or just want to dive a little bit deeper. So I'm so glad to connect again. I'll be sure to link our previous conversations in the show notes for listeners to go back and listen to those. But I just appreciate you being here and joining me today.
Thanks so much, Diane. It was a fun conversation.